It was a day like any other, at least, it seemed that way at first. The sun was shining brightly over the bustling streets of California, and Elon Musk's name was once again dominating the news cycle, but this time, it wasn't for the latest innovation or groundbreaking success of one of his companies. No, this time, the headlines screamed, "Judge slaps fine on Elon Musk." The courtroom had been quiet. Too quiet. Musk sat in his seat, his usual calm demeanor in full force, his expression unreadable. The lawyer beside him whispered something, but Musk's focus was fixed on the judge, whose face was as stone-cold as the marble floors beneath their feet. "Mr. Musk," the judge's voice echoed through the room. "You have been found in violation of federal regulations concerning the disclosure of material information. As such, I am issuing a fine of $1 billion. You may file an appeal, but the ruling stands." The room went dead silent. Musk's eyes didn't betray a flicker of emotion, but his mind was racing. $1 billion fine. The number was staggering, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about the implications. The ripple effect that this decision would have on his empire, his companies, and even his reputation. For those who didn't know him well, they might have assumed that this moment would break Musk. After all, a fine of this magnitude could topple even the most seasoned business moguls. But not Musk. Not the man who had faced ridicule, bankruptcy, and countless hurdles throughout his career. He'd never let a setback stop him. In fact, some might say he thrived on the challenge. Still, this fine was different. This wasn't just another lawsuit. It wasn't some small legal skirmish over stock prices or production timelines. This was a blow to the very core of what Musk represented, a man who had built his reputation on pushing the boundaries of what was possible. A fine this large could shake the very foundation of his empire. As the judge's gavel struck, signaling the end of the hearing, Musk stood up slowly, his mind already working overtime. He knew the media would have a field day with this. Headlines would spin out of control. Doubts would creep into the minds of his investors, and his critics would revel in this moment. But there was something else that weighed heavily on his shoulders, a decision he hadn't shared with anyone yet. If the ruling stood, it wasn't just about paying a fine. It was about something bigger. Something that no one was yet aware of. The fine wasn't just a penalty, it was a message. A warning. Musk walked out of the courtroom, his usual air of confidence still intact, but there was a shift in his demeanor. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't waving to the cameras. He wasn't even thinking about the next big innovation he was going to unveil. Instead, his thoughts were consumed with a singular question: what's next? As the doors closed behind him, his assistant approached with a phone in hand. "Elon, the press is waiting for a statement. Should we prepare something for you?" He took the phone, not even glancing at it. Instead, he gazed out over the city, lost in thought. "I'm not ready to talk yet," Musk replied quietly. "Give me a moment." He had been in tough spots before, facing bankruptcy, public backlash, and even the risk of losing everything. But this felt different. This was not just another legal battle, it was a turning point. Musk's rise to prominence had never been easy. From the early days of Zip2 to the meteoric rise of PayPal, to the world-changing impact of Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures, he had faced adversity at every corner. Critics had mocked him when he promised to send humans to Mars, when he proposed electric cars that could rival the best of traditional automakers, when he even said he was going to build a Hyperloop. And yet, time and time again, he proved them wrong. But now, this fine, this legal mess, could change everything. Would his empire stand tall, or would it crumble under the pressure? More importantly, what would he do next? In the following hours, the press release went out, and the world took notice. Every major news outlet picked up the story. Musk, the man who had conquered the impossible, now found himself battling an unexpected foe, the judicial system. The online reactions were swift and intense. Twitter exploded with debates about the fairness of the fine. Some people defended Musk, claiming that this was just another attempt to bring down a visionary. Others, however, saw this as proof that Musk's empire was built on shaky ground. But Musk wasn't worried about the media storm. He wasn't worried about public opinion. He had weathered much worse. No, what concerned him more was how this would affect the people who worked for him, the people who believed in his vision, in his ability to change the world. He could handle the media. He could handle the critics. But if his companies started to falter, if his workers started to lose faith, that would be the real disaster. As the hours turned into days, the fine remained the hot topic of conversation. Musk knew he couldn't just sit back and let things play out. He needed to act. He needed a strategy, and he needed it fast. There were too many moving parts, too many variables to ignore. But the truth was, even he didn't know exactly how he was going to deal with this. This wasn't just about fighting in court. This was about something bigger. Something personal. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? In the coming days, as the media continued to hound him and the legal proceedings dragged on, Musk would have to make a choice. A choice that would determine not just the future of his companies, but the future of his entire legacy. Would he rise above it all? Or would the fine be the thing that brought him down? The world was watching, and one thing was certain, what happened next would shock everyone. Elon Musk wasn't always the billionaire mogul the world knows today. There was a time when he was just like any other aspiring entrepreneur, hustling through the ups and downs of life. The difference was, while most people would have quit after the first few failures, Musk pressed on, convinced that he was meant to achieve something extraordinary. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Musk was a curious and ambitious child. He had a knack for figuring things out, whether it was building intricate models or coding software. But it wasn't just his intellect that set him apart, it was his drive. A relentless desire to push the boundaries of what was possible, even when the odds were stacked against him. As a teenager, Musk was often alone, spending his free time with books and computers. He was bullied in school, and his relationship with his father was strained. His parents separated when he was young, and that experience shaped much of his view on life. Musk's father was a difficult figure, distant and critical, but Musk never let that stop him from pursuing his dreams. "I knew I wanted to make something of myself," he would later say in interviews. "But I wasn't sure what it was at the time. I just knew it had to be big. It had to be something that would change the world." When Musk moved to Canada to attend Queen's University, it marked the beginning of his journey. At the age of 17, he moved away from home, driven by a desire to break free from his past and make a name for himself. His mother, May Musk, was an important influence during this time, encouraging him to chase his dreams and offering unwavering support. May had faced her own struggles, having been a single mother working as a dietitian and model, but she was always there for Elon, providing him with the motivation he needed to keep moving forward. Musk's first entrepreneurial venture came at the age of 24, when he dropped out of Stanford after just 2 days in order to pursue his own ideas. Alongside his brother Kimball, Musk founded Zip2, a software company that provided business directories and maps for newspapers. It was a tough start. They were young, inexperienced, and didn't have the resources of more established companies. They worked out of a cramped office, often sleeping on the floor and eating fast food. Musk was known for his obsessive work ethic, spending days without sleep to build the company. Zip2 was Musk's first taste of the startup world, and it was anything but easy. The brothers faced constant rejection, struggling to secure funding and convincing investors that their idea had potential. But Musk refused to back down. He was determined to prove that he could build something successful, no matter how impossible it seemed. Eventually, their persistence paid off when Compaq acquired Zip2 for nearly $300 million. Musk walked away with $22 million from the sale, his first big paycheck. But rather than resting on his laurels, Musk was already thinking bigger. he didn't want to stop there. The success of Zip2 gave him the confidence to push forward, and it wasn't long before he set his sights on something even more ambitious: PayPal. Musk founded X.com in 1999, an online payment company that would later become PayPal. Like Zip2, X.com faced its own set of challenges. There were technical issues, disagreements among the team, and constant pressure to scale the business. In fact, Musk was ousted from his own company in 2000, when the board decided to replace him with Peter Thiel. It was a crushing blow for Musk, who had poured everything into the company. But even in the face of failure, he didn't give up. Instead of letting his ego get in the way, Musk took his $165 million from the sale of X.com to eBay and invested it into new ventures. He focused on a goal that had always fascinated him: space exploration. His next project was going to be even bigger than anything he had attempted before. And it would test his resolve in ways he never expected. It was this early phase of Musk's life, the failures, the rejections, and the struggles, that laid the foundation for everything he would build in the future. But as he would soon learn, the road ahead would only get tougher. There was a deeper, more personal challenge waiting for him on the horizon, one that would involve not just his business acumen, but his very sense of self. By the time Musk had founded Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures, he was a household name. His vision for the future, revolutionizing the automotive industry with electric cars, sending humans to Mars, and creating sustainable energy solutions, had made him one of the most influential entrepreneurs in the world. But he didn't get there without paying a price. The pressure to succeed had been immense, and Musk found himself at odds with both employees and competitors. His unrelenting nature had earned him a reputation for being difficult to work with. Many called him a visionary, but others saw him as a man who was too driven to care about anything other than his companies. Still, he remained undeterred. Each setback only fueled his ambition further. The collapse of PayPal didn't stop him from creating Tesla, and the challenges at Tesla didn't stop him from building SpaceX. Musk was relentless, and with each victory, his confidence grew. But the struggles never stopped. He knew that in order to achieve his goals, he would have to take risks, big risks. And so, when Tesla was on the brink of bankruptcy in 2008, Musk put his last bit of money into the company to keep it afloat. It was a gamble, but Musk had always believed that the only way to change the world was to take risks, even if it meant walking the edge of failure. That same spirit of resilience, the drive to overcome the impossible, had propelled Musk to where he was today. But as the judge's gavel came down in the courtroom, signaling the start of a new chapter in his life, Musk would need every ounce of that determination to weather the storm. The billion-dollar fine wasn't just a legal issue. It was a reminder of how fragile even the strongest empires could be. It wasn't the first time Musk had faced adversity, but this time, the stakes were higher. The fine wasn't just a slap on the wrist, it was a warning. And Musk knew that he couldn't afford to lose this battle. The question now was, could he navigate through this latest storm without losing everything? Or would the weight of the legal battle prove to be too much, even for someone as resilient as him? The world was watching, and as Musk stood in the eye of the storm, one thing was certain: he was about to face the biggest challenge of his career yet. The days following the courtroom verdict were filled with tension, not just in the media, but within Musk's inner circle as well. Elon Musk had spent years building an empire, one that spanned electric cars, reusable rockets, and solar energy, but now, for the first time in a long while, the threat of losing it all felt very real. Musk knew he couldn't avoid the public eye. The fine had dominated headlines for days, and the court ruling wasn't going to disappear anytime soon. But what the public didn't know was that this legal battle was only the beginning of a series of crises that were slowly starting to unravel his world. Musk paced in his private office, the walls lined with images of his many projects, photos of Mars, blueprints for electric cars, rockets soaring into space. These were his dreams, his life's work. But today, they felt like distant memories. The news cameras were everywhere, snapping shots of his every move. He had learned how to handle the media circus over the years, but this was different. The fine, the legal ramifications, the pressure from his investors, it was all building, and he could feel the weight of it all pressing in on him. "Elon, we need to address the shareholders," said Gwynne Shotwell, president of SpaceX, as she walked into his office, closing the door behind her. Her face was serious, her eyes scanning the room with a sense of urgency. Musk nodded without saying anything. He had always respected Gwynne's calm, collected demeanor, especially in times of crisis. She was the steady hand that guided SpaceX through countless obstacles, and now, she was here to help him navigate this new storm. "Do you have a statement prepared for them?" she asked, knowing Musk well enough to understand that his mind was likely racing in 100 different directions at once. "No. I don't have one ready," Musk replied, his voice tight. "There's too much at stake. One wrong word, and it could trigger a collapse." Shotwell crossed her arms, studying him carefully. "You need to reassure them, Elon. If they lose faith in you, everything you've built could unravel. We can't afford that." Musk was silent for a long moment, his eyes narrowing as he stared out the window at the sprawling SpaceX campus below. The company had just completed its first successful manned mission to the International Space Station, a landmark achievement that was supposed to launch SpaceX into the future. But now, all anyone was talking about was the fine and the legal battle. He had to take control of the narrative. He had to show that he wasn't just another businessman who could be knocked down by a court ruling. "I'm not worried about what the media says," Musk finally spoke, his voice steadying. "I'm worried about what the people in this room think, my team, my investors, my employees. If they start questioning whether we can handle something like this, that's when we're in trouble." Gwynne nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "So, what's the plan?" Musk looked her square in the eyes. "We fight back. But we don't just fight in court. We fight with action. We make sure that no one can say we're anything less than unstoppable. We show the world that nothing can derail our vision. Not a fine, not a lawsuit, nothing." She gave him a small, approving nod. "I like that approach. But we need to move fast. The press is already speculating about your future. You can't let this go on for too long without addressing it." Musk stood up from his desk and walked to the wall where a large whiteboard stood, filled with diagrams and scribbled notes. He paused for a moment, considering his next steps. His thoughts were all over the place, but there was one thing that had always grounded him, his vision for the future. Tesla and SpaceX weren't just companies. They were his life's work. They were the embodiment of his dream to change the world, to push humanity to new heights, to make life multiplanetary. And nothing, not a billion-dollar fine or a few angry investors, would get in the way of that. "Get the team together," Musk said decisively, turning back to Gwynne. "We're going to triple down on everything. Tesla's going to hit the production numbers we promised, SpaceX will launch more missions this year than anyone thought possible, and we're going to accelerate the timeline on the solar initiative. But Elon, you're going to need to give the shareholders something more tangible," Gwynne pointed out. "A vision, something that'll show them we're still in control. They need that reassurance." He took a deep breath, his mind now sharp, his focus on the future. "All right. We'll do a big reveal. Not just some new product announcement. We'll show the world that we're not just reacting to a fine, we're going to be making history. And we're doing it now." Gwynne raised an eyebrow. "A big reveal? What exactly do you have in mind?" Musk smiled, his usual glint of mischief returning to his eyes. "We're going to launch the next generation of the Tesla Model S, but we're going to unveil it in a way no one expects. At the same time, we'll announce the next SpaceX mission to Mars. 2 major milestones in one day. People won't know what hit them." Gwynne nodded approvingly. "It's bold. But if anyone can pull it off, it's you." Musk turned back to the whiteboard, his eyes scanning the complex schedule and plans laid out before him. He could feel the weight of the fine still hanging over him, but now, something had shifted. He wasn't going to let this legal battle define him. Instead, he would use it as fuel to drive forward, to push even harder toward his goals. But there was something deeper going on, something that Musk wasn't yet ready to admit to anyone, least of all himself. The fine, the mounting pressure, and the sense that his empire could crumble at any moment had started to take a toll on him. The once unshakable confidence was beginning to falter, and a part of him wondered if he could really pull this off. The fear of failure, the thought that his dream could slip away, was beginning to creep in. But Musk had always faced fear head-on. And now, more than ever, he needed to prove to himself, to his team, and to the world that nothing could break him. This was his moment to rise from the ashes, to show that no matter how many setbacks came his way, he would always find a way to win. And in the back of his mind, a single thought echoed: the future was waiting. And it was his to shape. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The next few days were a blur of high-stakes meetings, late-night strategy sessions, and an overwhelming sense of urgency. Elon Musk had always thrived under pressure, but this time, the stakes felt different. His entire empire, Tesla, SpaceX, and everything he had worked for, was teetering on the edge. $1 billion fine was just the beginning. The real test was whether his vision, his drive, and his relentless determination could weather the storm that was quickly gaining momentum. Musk knew that he needed something more than just bold ideas, he needed action. And not just any action, but a statement. The kind that would make people forget about the court ruling and focus on the future. It was time to turn the narrative back in his favor. To do that, he had a plan. A plan so audacious that it might just be crazy enough to work. He sat in the sleek conference room at Tesla's headquarters, surrounded by some of his most trusted advisors and engineers. Gwynne Shotwell was there, along with a handful of key people from SpaceX and Tesla, all looking to Musk for guidance in these turbulent times. They all knew that the next move he made would either cement his legacy or bring it all crashing down. "Elon, what are we going to do next?" Gwynne asked, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of concern. "The media is calling this a crisis, and we're running out of time to turn things around." Musk leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning the room. The walls were adorned with images of Tesla's sleek electric cars, SpaceX rockets poised to launch into the stars. This wasn't just a company. It was a movement. A revolution. But now, it was in danger. "I've been thinking," Musk began, his voice steady despite the pressure mounting on him. "We've been playing defense for too long. We need to go on offense. And to do that, we need a bold move." The room fell silent. The team knew that when Musk spoke like this, it meant something big was coming. "I'm talking about launching the first manned mission to Mars," Musk continued. "It's time to stop waiting for the perfect moment. It's time to make history. Now." Gwynne looked at him, her eyebrows raised. "Elon, we've been working on Mars missions for years, but launching one so soon. The technology isn't quite there yet, and we're already pushing the limits with the upcoming launches. This could put SpaceX in jeopardy." "I know the risks," Musk said, his tone firm. "But if we wait for everything to be perfect, we'll never make it. We're going to build a rocket and get it to Mars, quicker than anyone thinks is possible. And we're going to do it with the eyes of the world watching." The room was quiet for a moment as everyone absorbed what he was saying. SpaceX was already facing a mountain of challenges. The Falcon Heavy, their largest rocket, had barely launched its first successful mission. The Starship prototype was still in its testing phase. Yet, Musk was proposing that they accelerate the timeline and make a splash by sending humans to Mars in the next few years. One of the engineers, a young man named Peter, spoke up hesitantly. "But Elon, even with all our progress, we don't have the infrastructure yet. The landing technology is still untested, and the life support systems need more work." Musk's gaze never wavered. "We've been testing the life support systems for years. We've been testing the landing technology for even longer. It's not about whether we have everything we need now. It's about pushing forward, even when we don't. That's how we get to Mars, not by waiting for perfect conditions, but by making the impossible happen. Gwyn was silent for a moment, considering the implications of what Musk was proposing. She knew better than anyone the magnitude of what he was asking. But she also knew that when Elon Musk set his mind to something, it was nearly impossible to change it. "You're right," she said finally. "If anyone can pull this off, it's us. But we're going to need a massive push, financially, logistically, and publicly. Are you ready for that?" "I've always been ready," Musk replied, his voice low and resolute. "We're going to need to ramp up our fundraising efforts for both Tesla and SpaceX. I'll call the investors. I'll get the team together. We can't wait for the next big breakthrough, we're going to make the breakthrough ourselves." There was a sense of excitement in the room now. Musk's conviction was contagious. For the first time in days, the team felt like they had a clear goal. A new mission to focus on. And it was bigger than anything they had ever attempted before. But that was exactly what Musk wanted. He needed this audacious mission to overshadow the legal troubles, to remind the world what was at stake, not just for SpaceX or Tesla, but for humanity. His dream had always been bigger than just business. It was about pushing the limits of what was possible and showing the world that the future was within reach. As the meeting continued, Musk began outlining the specifics of the Mars mission. He pushed the team to move faster, think bigger, and be bolder than ever before. There was no time for hesitation. Meanwhile, across the country, Tesla's board was growing increasingly concerned. The fine, the lawsuit, and the mounting pressure had caused a rift between Musk and some of his investors. They were worried that Musk's obsession with Mars and space exploration was taking his focus away from Tesla's electric vehicle development. The future of the company was at stake. But Musk wasn't about to let his critics win. He had always believed in the bigger picture. If he could secure the future of Tesla and SpaceX simultaneously, it would solidify his legacy. It would prove that he wasn't just a tech mogul, he was a visionary, capable of changing the world on a scale no one else could. Over the next few weeks, Musk's plans started to take shape. He worked tirelessly with his team to accelerate the timeline on both Tesla's next vehicle models and SpaceX's Mars mission. He called in favors from his most trusted allies in the tech world, made daring moves in the financial markets, and even began securing commitments from government agencies and private partners to fund the Mars mission. But as the pressure mounted, so did the risks. The stakes were higher than ever, and every decision Musk made felt like it could tip the scales between success and failure. And through it all, one thing was clear: the road ahead was going to be tougher than ever. But Musk had never been afraid of a challenge. In fact, he thrived on it. The world would soon see if his gamble would pay off. But one thing was certain: Elon Musk was about to change the game once again. And this time, he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. As Musk and his team at SpaceX and Tesla ramped up their efforts for the upcoming Mars mission, the world outside was beginning to take notice. The press had been relentless in covering the fallout from the courtroom decision, speculating on Musk's future and the future of his companies. But Musk was determined to shift the narrative, to remind the world why he was still the innovator, the game-changer, the visionary they had come to know. For days, his teams worked around the clock, fine-tuning designs, negotiating with investors, and preparing the logistics for the Mars mission. At the same time, Tesla continued to advance toward the release of new, groundbreaking electric vehicle models. Musk knew it was going to be a tightrope walk, managing two massive undertakings at once, but it was the only way to keep his empire from collapsing under the weight of the legal challenges. However, in the midst of all the planning, there was an eerie calm settling over Musk. As a man known for his drive, determination, and often chaotic energy, the quiet was unsettling. For once, it wasn't his companies or his projects that occupied his mind. It was something more personal. Late one evening, as Musk sat alone in his office overlooking the sprawling Tesla factory, his thoughts turned inward. The hum of the machines in the background was a familiar sound, one he had lived with for years, but tonight, it seemed distant, like a mere echo of the larger forces that had come into play. The weight of his responsibilities, the crushing pressure of the court ruling, and the ever-present need to prove himself were starting to take their toll. His phone buzzed on the desk in front of him, breaking the silence. It was a message from Gwyn Shotwell. "We need to talk. Important." Musk hesitated for a moment before responding. "I'm in. Come to my office." Gwyn arrived shortly afterward, her calm demeanor still a steadying presence. But Musk could see the concern in her eyes. She wasn't one to waste time with pleasantries when something important was at stake. "Elon, I know you're under a lot of pressure, but we have to talk about the bigger picture here," Gwyn said as she took a seat across from him. Musk leaned forward, his fingers drumming against the table. "What's on your mind?" Gwyn paused, choosing her words carefully. "We're pushing ourselves hard with both Tesla and SpaceX. But you have to understand, the board, both at Tesla and SpaceX, are concerned about you. They see what you're doing, and they're worried you're stretching yourself too thin." Musk raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Is that what this is about? They want me to pull back." "It's not about pulling back," Gwyn said, her voice firm. "It's about balancing priorities. You've been working non-stop for weeks, and you're on the verge of something major. But you have to be in top shape for it. If you're not careful, you'll burn out before you get to the finish line. And that would jeopardize everything." Musk took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. Gwyn was right, he had been pushing himself to the limit. The never-ending meetings, the constant pressure, the weight of his own expectations, it was all beginning to chip away at him. But giving up, even for a moment, had never been an option for him. He had fought too long and too hard to build everything he had. "I can't stop now," Musk said, his voice low but resolute. "The Mars mission, the new Tesla models, everything is in motion. If I step back, even for a second, it could all fall apart." "I understand that," Gwyn said, leaning forward. "But there's something you need to understand too. You're not invincible. Your vision for the future of humanity, on Earth and beyond, is incredible. But it's going to take a toll. If you're not careful, you'll lose sight of that vision." Musk stood up, walking over to the window and gazing out at the vast expanse of the Tesla factory. The factory floor was a sea of activity, workers moving with purpose, the steady rhythm of production filling the air. In that moment, it felt like the entire world was moving around him, and he was standing still. The calm before the storm. "I've always believed that if you want to change the world, you have to be willing to sacrifice everything," Musk said, his voice tinged with something close to vulnerability. "And that's what I've done. I've sacrificed everything for this. For the future. For humanity." Gwyn didn't argue. She had heard Musk's rhetoric many times before, and she knew the depth of his conviction. But tonight, it felt different. There was an underlying exhaustion in his voice that hadn't been there before. The weight of everything, his empire, his vision, his personal life, was starting to weigh him down. "I know you believe in the mission," Gwyn said softly. "But the future won't be shaped by just one person. It'll be shaped by the team, by the people who are willing to work alongside you. You need to remember that. You can't do it alone, Elon." Musk turned back to her, his eyes meeting hers. "I never wanted to do it alone. But sometimes, it feels like the weight of the world is on my shoulders. And every decision I make, every risk I take, it's all on me. That's the burden of leadership," Gwyn said. "But you don't have to carry it alone." Musk paused for a long time, considering her words. It wasn't easy for him to admit, but deep down, he knew she was right. He had spent so long focusing on the future, on the mission, on his legacy, that he had lost sight of the most important thing, the people around him. He had a team. A team that believed in his vision, a team that was willing to follow him wherever he led. But he had to lead them, not as a solitary figure, but as someone who knew when to lean on others. "I'll think about it," Musk finally said, his tone softer than before. "Maybe I do need to take a step back. Just for a moment. To regroup." Gwyn smiled, relief washing over her. "That's all I'm asking." As she left the room, Musk sank back into his chair, the weight of the world pressing on him once more. He had always believed that to make a difference, he had to be unrelenting. But perhaps, for the first time in a long time, he realized that even the most unyielding visionaries needed to pause. The storm was still coming. And Elon Musk knew that, once it arrived, it would test him in ways he had never imagined. But for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to face it alone. The calm before the storm had ended. Now, it was time for the real battle to begin. Days passed, and despite the ongoing whirlwind of developments, Musk tried to heed Gwyn's advice. He took a few moments to step back, gather his thoughts, and regain some perspective. But even in those quiet moments, he couldn't escape the reality of what was unfolding. The pressure from both Tesla and SpaceX, the looming deadlines, the media scrutiny, and the constant reminder of the judge's ruling were enough to keep anyone on edge. Yet, Elon Musk had never been anyone. At the same time, the courts were still weighing the implications of the massive fine they had imposed on him, and the media was relentless in questioning whether Musk could truly handle the burden of his ambitions. Journalists and analysts from all corners were speculating about the downfall of the world's most ambitious entrepreneur. But one thing Musk knew for sure was that if there was anyone who could thrive in adversity, it was him. After all, history had proven that when things got tough, that's when he pushed hardest. However, in the background, a subtle yet forceful resistance began to build. Musk was used to opposition, it was a part of his journey. He had been a disruptor from the start, challenging the automotive and aerospace industries, trying to change the status quo. But now, the opposition came from unexpected places. There were murmurs within the boardroom at Tesla, whispers among investors. Some of the company's most influential stakeholders began to question Musk's vision, arguing that his obsession with Mars and space exploration was pulling him away from the company's core mission, making electric vehicles mainstream. It was a debate that had been simmering for months, but now, with the looming legal battle, the pressure was mounting. One particular investor, Richard Hall, a venture capitalist with a significant stake in Tesla, had become vocal about his concerns. He wasn't just worried about the fine, he was worried about the long-term impact of Musk's ambitions on Tesla's growth. "Elon is no longer focused on the business we're running here," Richard told a colleague one afternoon, his tone filled with frustration. "He's too fixated on space. It's like he's using Tesla as a springboard for his next big project." Richard was not the only one. Others in the Tesla boardroom were starting to feel the same way. Elon had always promised them that their investments would help usher in a new era of clean energy and electric vehicles. But instead, they were watching as their CEO seemed more concerned with colonizing Mars than advancing electric vehicle technology. Some wondered if his obsession with the stars was taking Tesla off course. Elon had always played the long game, but this was different. For the first time, his team's faith in his leadership was beginning to waver. And that was a problem. Back in the SpaceX offices, a similar story was unfolding. Musk had always pushed the boundaries of what was possible, but now, as the Mars mission began to take shape, the internal concerns about whether the company could pull off such an ambitious project grew louder. The pressure to execute was immense, and with it came the growing risk of failure. One evening, during a meeting with SpaceX engineers, Musk's doubts began to surface in the most unexpected way. "You know, we're trying to build a rocket capable of sending humans to Mars," Musk said, his voice tight. "But is it really feasible in the timeline we've set? Do we have everything we need, or are we just pretending that we do?" The room was filled with silence. It wasn't often that Musk showed vulnerability in front of his team. They had always seen him as the unflappable visionary, someone who believed in the impossible and made it happen. But now, with everything on the line, even Musk was questioning whether his vision would come to fruition. "Elon, we've made incredible progress," Gwynn spoke up, offering a reassuring smile. "We've tested the Starship prototypes. We're close. We've got the talent, the tech, and the commitment. We just need to keep moving forward." But Musk wasn't so sure. He had always trusted his instincts, and right now, they were telling him that they might be rushing into something they weren't prepared for. The risks were growing, and even Musk couldn't ignore that. The internal pushback was growing louder each day. As he lay awake late that night, thinking about the weight of the decisions ahead, Musk couldn't help but wonder if he had made a mistake. Perhaps the critics were right. Maybe he had spread himself too thin. Could he really juggle the immense responsibilities of Tesla, SpaceX, and now this Mars mission? It was then that he received a message from someone he had been avoiding for weeks. It was a text from Grimes. "Elon, we need to talk. I've been thinking about everything." Musk stared at the screen for a moment before responding. "I'm listening." Grimes didn't mince words. "You've been so focused on Mars that you've forgotten about us. About what's important right now. The world is watching you, but you need to stop and think about the people who are in your life." Musk felt a pang of guilt in his chest. Grimes had been a constant source of support throughout his journey, but even she seemed to be questioning his obsession with the future. He had always been so single-minded in his pursuit of greatness that he had neglected the present, the people who mattered most. "I haven't forgotten about you," he typed back, his fingers hovering over the keys. "But this is bigger than anything. This is about the future of humanity." But Grimes' response was sharp. "The future of humanity is important, but so is the present. And if you're not careful, you'll lose everything that matters now, and then the future won't even matter." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had always been driven by a sense of purpose, an unyielding desire to make the impossible happen. But what if she was right? What if, in his pursuit of the stars, he was losing sight of the people around him who kept him grounded? Musk had always been willing to sacrifice everything for his mission. But perhaps, for the first time, he wondered if that was the right choice. Could he find a way to achieve his dreams without sacrificing the people who made him who he was? The internal struggle was becoming unbearable. The resistance was coming from all sides now, his investors, his team, and even his personal life. Could Musk truly balance his lofty ambitions with the demands of the world around him? Or would he lose it all in his pursuit of something bigger than himself? One thing was certain, the storm was approaching, and it was not going to be easy to weather. Elon Musk had always been a man of extremes. He thrived in chaos, embraced discomfort, and often reveled in the tension between his lofty ambitions and the seemingly impossible reality around him. But lately, the battles he fought on multiple fronts were starting to take their toll in ways he had never anticipated. What began as a personal crisis, a nagging doubt about his ability to handle everything, was slowly transforming into something much larger. It was a Tuesday morning when Musk received an email that would change the course of his day, and perhaps the course of his life. The subject line read, "Urgent, investors meeting, immediate action required." Opening the email, he saw that it was a request for a crisis meeting with the major stakeholders of Tesla and SpaceX. The wording was sharp, direct, and unambiguous. "Your recent statements and the direction you've taken have raised serious concerns among our board members. Immediate intervention is required to clarify your plans moving forward. We need a clear vision, not just bold ambitions." Musk stared at the screen for a long time, the weight of the words pressing down on him. He had been anticipating some form of rebellion from the investors. What he hadn't expected was the intensity of the resistance now facing him. Tesla was still profitable, yes, but the question remained, could it continue to thrive under Musk's leadership if he kept his focus on SpaceX and Mars? Gwynne Shotwell had been in Musk's corner throughout his career at SpaceX, but now, even she was beginning to voice concerns. There were muttered worries in the corridors of SpaceX about the lack of direction Musk had been providing. The grand ambitions of Mars had inspired the team, but many were starting to feel like they were just another part of Musk's personal dream, something too far removed from the practical, achievable milestones they had once worked toward. The meeting with the investors was scheduled for the following day. Musk arrived at the Tesla headquarters, greeted by the same cold professionalism that had always characterized the corporate world. Yet today, the air felt different, charged, as if something important was about to happen. Inside the sleek, minimalist boardroom, the key stakeholders sat waiting. Richard Hall, the outspoken venture capitalist, was already there. He sat at the head of the table, his arms crossed, eyes narrowed. Gwynne Shotwell was beside him, though she wore a more neutral expression. The rest of the room was filled with people Musk had known for years, trusted allies who were now looking at him with a mix of curiosity and concern. Elon, Richard began, his voice firm and deliberate. We're glad you could make it. We need to get to the heart of things. The direction you're going in, both with Tesla and SpaceX, is raising some significant concerns. Musk sat down, his posture stiff, but his mind already racing. He had been in countless meetings before. Battling investors, fighting for what he believed in. But this time, the stakes felt higher. His empire, the culmination of decades of work, was now on the line. Let's be clear, Richard continued. Tesla's future isn't just about making electric cars. It's about creating a sustainable future for all of humanity. That's a vision we can get behind. But what we're seeing is a man who's so fixated on Mars that he's losing focus on the very thing that made Tesla what it is today. We don't see the level of commitment from you that we once did. Musk leaned forward, a sharp edge creeping into his voice. I've committed more than anyone ever could to this company. I gave up everything, my time, my resources, because I believe in what we're doing here. If you think I'm distracted, I'm not. I'm doing what's necessary to push humanity forward. Whether it's here on Earth or on Mars, the vision has always been the same. Gwynne nodded slightly in agreement but added, we understand your vision, Elon. But sometimes, the problem isn't the vision. It's how we communicate that vision. How we turn ambition into practical, actionable goals. And right now, the practical aspects are starting to slip away. Musk's eyes narrowed, but he wasn't about to back down. I am not here to play it safe. The world doesn't change by sticking to what's comfortable. We have to keep pushing the envelope. Richard's expression grew even more intense. And pushing the envelope is fine, if we know what's at stake. If we know what the endgame is. But there's a point at which we need to ensure that the present is sustainable before jumping into the future. We're asking you to focus on today. There's no more room for distractions. The word stung, but Musk remained silent, choosing instead to let the tension linger. The room was filled with a palpable weight, his biggest supporters now questioning his every move. He had always prided himself on his ability to juggle multiple projects at once, but here, in this room, reality was coming crashing down on him. Were they right? Had he truly lost sight of what mattered most? Gwynne's calm voice cut through the silence. Elon, I think we need to rethink the way we're positioning ourselves. You've always said we're not here to just make money. We're here to change the world. But there's a difference between revolutionizing a market and burning bridges that could support us. Musk sat back in his chair, the weight of the conversation beginning to settle into his bones. He had known the stakes were high, but now, he was being confronted with the fact that his ambitions might have alienated the very people who helped him reach these heights in the first place. After the meeting, Musk walked out of the boardroom, his mind whirling. The confrontation had been brutal, but it had also served as a harsh mirror reflecting the choices he had made. SpaceX's Mars mission was still a dream within reach, but Tesla, the company that had launched his entire career, was teetering on the edge. Musk knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. His next steps would determine not only the future of his companies but also the course of his legacy. But something had shifted in him during that meeting, something deeper than the usual fire of defiance. The realization that he couldn't continue living for just the next big thing, or the next technological marvel. The future he was building was important, but so was the here and now. So were the people who had followed him from the beginning, the ones who had trusted him with their time, energy, and resources. In the coming days, Musk would have to make decisions that would define the direction of his company's and personal life. And whether he liked it or not, these decisions couldn't be made alone. The storm was growing, and it was no longer just a matter of survival, it was a matter of who he was becoming in the process. The tide was shifting. Musk could feel it. And as much as he fought to keep it at bay, he knew one thing for certain: the real battle had only just begun. The storm of uncertainty that had loomed over Elon Musk's empire was no longer a distant threat, it had arrived, and it was relentless. He had always been able to stay one step ahead, outpace his critics, and deflect the pressure. But now, for the first time in his career, the questions weren't just about his grand visions. They were about his ability to lead the companies he had built from the ground up. Musk sat in the glass-walled office at SpaceX headquarters, overlooking the sprawling campus where rockets were being tested, and engineers worked tirelessly to shape the future of space travel. Yet, despite the tangible advancements surrounding him, his mind was far from focused on the mission at hand. The weight of his decisions, his ambition, his failure to keep things in balance, hung over him like an invisible cloud. The aftermath of the investor meeting was still fresh in his mind. The faces of Richard Hall, Gwynne Shotwell, and the other Tesla and SpaceX stakeholders seemed to haunt him. They hadn't just criticized his decisions, they had questioned his core values. And for someone like Musk, whose entire identity was wrapped up in his belief that he could change the world, that sting was unbearable. It had been nearly a week since the meeting, and the tension in the air was palpable. Gwynne Shotwell had continued to offer her guidance, but even she couldn't completely suppress the growing unease at SpaceX. The engineers were still motivated by the potential of reaching Mars, but now, some of them were starting to ask tough questions. Elon, Gwynne said, walking into his office, we need to address the rising concern within the company. People are starting to wonder if we're prioritizing Mars over the real-world challenges we're facing here on Earth. The team is feeling the pressure, and we're losing some of the trust we once had. Musk looked at her, his eyes distant. What do you suggest? Gwynne sighed. You need to communicate more clearly with the team. We've been operating in this vacuum of uncertainty for too long. You need to remind them why they started working here in the first place. Why they believe in the mission. Elon ran his hands through his hair, feeling a frustration rising. I've been focused on this mission for years, Gwynne. SpaceX is about the future. I can't just back off because some people feel uncomfortable with the scope of it all. That's not what I'm saying, she replied gently. It's about balance. You can still focus on Mars, but you need to remind everyone, including yourself, that we're still here. We're still making history. But if we lose our footing here, on Earth, everything we've worked for is at risk. Musk took a deep breath, allowing her words to sink in. He knew she was right. SpaceX had changed the world of space travel, but his blind pursuit of the future had come at the expense of the present. The situation at Tesla was no better. The boardroom was tense, with investors still on edge. Richard Hall, in particular, was pushing for drastic changes. Elon, we need a clear, achievable path forward. We can't keep losing focus on electric vehicles while you chase these far-off dreams. You built Tesla to be a leader in sustainable energy, not to bankroll your Mars mission. Musk had heard these concerns countless times before, but this was different. The gravity of the moment had shifted. His investors were growing restless, and that unrest was starting to ripple through the company. He sat across from Richard, his eyes meeting the investors. I've always believed in thinking bigger, Richard. But I also see what you're saying. I get it. We need to bring the focus back to where it all began, on the cars, on the energy solutions, on changing the world right here on Earth. Richard nodded, though he didn't seem convinced. I hope you mean that, Elon. Because we're starting to lose confidence in your ability to balance the two. SpaceX is important, but Tesla can't afford to be treated like a side project. The words hit Musk harder than he expected. He had always treated his ventures like his children, each one a reflection of his desire to push humanity forward. But perhaps he had allowed his obsession with space to eclipse the responsibility he had to Tesla's shareholders, to the company that had made him a household name. The days following the meeting were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and late-night reflections. Musk was haunted by the faces of those who had trusted him, his team, his investors, and even his family. Grimes had tried to reach out again, but he had been too distracted to respond. She was right. He had been so focused on the distant stars that he had lost sight of the people who had been with him through thick and thin. That night, he finally replied to her message, "We need to talk. Let's meet tomorrow." The following morning, they met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Los Angeles, far from the prying eyes of paparazzi and the constant chatter of business. Grimes was already sitting at a table by the window when Musk arrived, her expression calm but full of quiet concern. "Elon, what's going on?" she asked, her voice soft but insistent. "You've been pulling away. And it's not just about the work. It's about everything else. The kids, the future, us." Musk sat down across from her, rubbing his temples. "I don't know anymore, Grimes. I've always been driven by this belief that I could change the world. I've sacrificed so much for that dream. But now, I don't know what's left to fight for. Tesla is at a crossroads. SpaceX is at a tipping point. My own damn reputation is on the line. And all the while, I've lost sight of the most important things." Grimes watched him carefully, not offering solutions but just listening, allowing the weight of his words to settle in the space between them. "It's not just about Mars, Elon," she said after a long pause. "It's about balance. You can dream big, but you can't lose everything else in the process. You've already created something incredible here on Earth. Don't forget that. Don't let your legacy be defined by what you could have had in the future if you lose the present." Musk's eyes softened as he looked at her. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he was seeing clearly. It wasn't just about building rockets or electric cars or reaching Mars. It was about living in the moment, about the relationships he had, about the impact he could have on the world right now, not just someday. He nodded slowly. "You're right. I've been too caught up in the dream of Mars to remember what really matters here. I need to make this right. For Tesla. For SpaceX. For all of us." As he left the cafe that day, a sense of resolve began to settle in. Musk knew he had a long road ahead, his companies needed his attention, his investors needed reassurance, and his family needed his presence. But for the first time in a long time, he understood what needed to change. He couldn't chase the future at the expense of the present. He had to rebuild trust, both in his companies and within himself. The ripple effect of his choices was undeniable, but it wasn't too late to change the course. Musk was about to make decisions that would define the future of his companies and the direction of his life. But as the storm raged on, one thing was clear: he was ready to face the consequences. The days after that pivotal conversation with Grimes felt like a turning point for Elon Musk. There was a clarity in his mind, a new sense of purpose that had eluded him for weeks. The ripple effect of his actions had already begun to take shape. Decisions that were previously clouded by his relentless drive for the future were now being seen through the lens of balance. He knew it wasn't going to be easy. The companies he had built were complex, and the stakes had never been higher. But now, he had a plan. It wasn't about choosing between Mars and Earth anymore. It was about managing both. Ensuring that the companies he'd poured his heart and soul into didn't collapse under the weight of his obsession with the stars. The first step was clear: he had to show his team, both at SpaceX and Tesla, that he was committed to making things right. Musk had always thrived in high-pressure environments, but now the pressure was different. It was internal, self-imposed. For years, he had been the sole architect of his empire, but now, he had to lean on others. He couldn't do it all himself. The morning after his conversation with Grimes, Musk called for an all-hands meeting at Tesla headquarters. The room was filled with engineers, designers, and executives who had been working tirelessly on electric vehicles, energy solutions, and solar technologies. As they gathered in the large conference room, the energy in the air was noticeably different. There was a quiet tension. They knew the challenges ahead, and they were waiting for Musk's direction. As he stood before them, the weight of the moment settled over him. He had been here before, leading this team, pushing them toward their next milestone. But this time, something had changed. "Thank you for being here," Musk began, his voice steady but carrying an edge of vulnerability that his team hadn't heard before. "I know things have been difficult lately. I've been pushing hard, maybe too hard, and that's created a lot of uncertainty. And for that, I apologize." The room was silent, the engineers exchanging uncertain glances. Musk wasn't known for showing weakness. But here he was, acknowledging his shortcomings. "I want to make this clear," he continued. "Tesla's mission hasn't changed. We're still building a sustainable future, and we still have the power to change the world. But we can't do it if we're divided. We need to work together. And I need to be present. I need to be here for you, just as much as you're here for me." The sincerity in his words was palpable. For the first time in a long while, the team at Tesla saw Musk not as an untouchable visionary, but as a leader willing to admit that he needed them just as much as they needed him. One of the engineers, Sarah, spoke up. "Elon, we've always believed in the mission. We just need you to trust us, to lead with us, not just for us." Musk nodded. "I hear you. And I will. From this point on, I will make sure to listen more and push less. We are all in this together." The meeting ended on a more optimistic note than any of them had expected. There was still a lot of work to do, and the road ahead would be challenging. But for the first time in a long while, there was a sense of unity in the room. Musk knew he couldn't afford to lose this momentum. He had to rebuild trust, not just with his team, but with the investors, the media, and the world. Later that day, Musk made the call to the SpaceX leadership team. The company had reached its own critical juncture. The Starship project was facing its own set of delays and challenges. The engineers were frustrated, and the morale was low. Musk couldn't afford another failure on the public stage. The mission to Mars had become more than just a personal goal, it was a symbol of everything he had worked for. But if the team at SpaceX was to succeed, he needed to provide them with something more than just grand visions. They needed guidance, they needed assurance, and they needed him to be present. "I need to be clear," Musk told Gwynne Shotwell and the other senior leaders during the call. "The focus can't be only on Mars. It has to be about the here and now. We need to make sure we're not just aiming for the stars, we need to make sure we're keeping our feet on the ground. We're all in this together. I've been too disconnected, and it's time I step back into the fold." Gwynne, ever the steady hand, responded. "Elon, this is exactly what we need to hear. The team is feeling disconnected. They need more than just technical goals, they need to know you're with them. This is about more than just rockets. It's about people. It's about the culture we've built here." Musk was quiet for a moment, processing her words. "You're right. I've been thinking about the wrong things. We'll make this work. Together." The next few weeks were a blur of action, but this time, Musk was present in a way he hadn't been in months. He met with his engineers at both Tesla and SpaceX, spending more time on the floor, offering feedback, and engaging in the everyday work. He visited the Tesla gigafactories and sat down with workers to hear their concerns. He reviewed progress on the new electric vehicles, talking through the design processes and challenging the team to think bigger. At SpaceX, he dove into the technical aspects of the Starship project, asking the hard questions: but this time, his focus wasn't just on the end goal of Mars, it was on the process of getting there, step by step, with every person in the company contributing to the mission. It wasn't just about making groundbreaking discoveries or reaching Mars anymore. It was about creating a culture of collaboration, trust, and shared vision. Musk began to delegate more, leaning on his senior leadership team to take charge of day-to-day operations while he refocused on the big picture. He was still the visionary, but now, he was a more grounded one who recognized the importance of the team behind the dream. Musk also made a point to reach out to his investors, communicating with them more openly and frequently. He knew that many of them were still on edge, questioning his ability to manage both Tesla and SpaceX. But he was ready to show them that he could walk the line between ambition and practicality. He would prove that his vision for the future was achievable without sacrificing the present. The results started to show. At Tesla, production numbers were up. The new Model S Plaid had received rave reviews, and the energy division was making strides toward becoming more profitable. At SpaceX, Starship was slowly but surely getting closer to its next major test flight. The engineering team was rejuvenated, and the media began to take notice of the positive shift in Musk's leadership. Musk had pivoted, not just in his approach to his companies, but in his understanding of what it meant to lead. It wasn't about doing everything himself. It wasn't about being the only one with the answers. It was about collaboration, about trust, and about showing the world that sometimes, leadership is not just about being the loudest voice in the room, it's about being the one who listens, learns, and leads by example. The pivot wasn't just a change in strategy, it was a change in Musk himself. And with it came a new hope, a renewed sense of possibility for both Tesla and SpaceX. But as the storm clouds began to part, a new challenge loomed on the horizon, a challenge that would test Musk's newfound approach like never before. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the weeks passed, the momentum Musk had built from his pivot continued to grow. Tesla's production ramped up, SpaceX's Starship project seemed to be on track for its next big milestone, and the internal culture at both companies had improved significantly. The atmosphere was lighter, more collaborative, and for the first time in a long while, Musk felt like he was truly leading both companies in the right direction. However, the calm would be short-lived. One morning, just as Musk was preparing to meet with his leadership team at SpaceX to discuss their latest progress, his phone buzzed on the desk. It was a news alert. Judge orders Elon Musk to pay $10 billion fine over alleged fraudulent claims about Tesla. He froze. For a moment, he thought it was a bad joke or a mistake. But the news quickly spread across every media outlet. Headlines screamed at him from every direction, each one more sensational than the last. Allegations of fraud, claims of misleading investors, and accusations that Musk had violated securities laws. Musk's heart sank. He had fought so hard to put the controversies of the past behind him, to regain the trust of his investors and employees. And now, it felt like the ground was crumbling beneath him once again. The phone call came moments later. It was Richard Hall, his most vocal and influential investor at Tesla. "Elon, this is bad," Richard's voice crackled through the line, clearly anxious. "You need to respond. You can't just sit on your hands here. The press is eating this up." Musk, trying to maintain his composure, replied with a deep breath, "I'm aware, Richard. I'm already on it. I need to consult with the legal team." Richard wasn't satisfied. "This isn't just about Tesla anymore. This is about your credibility. If the public thinks you're a fraud, it doesn't matter how many rockets you build or how many electric cars you sell. People will lose trust in you. We can't afford that." Musk sighed, feeling the pressure building once again. His entire journey, every company, every decision, every leap of faith, was now under scrutiny. This wasn't just another controversy. This could be the end of everything he had worked for. The next few hours were a blur of meetings with legal teams, public relations experts, and financial advisors. Everyone was scrambling to assess the situation, to craft a defense, and to prevent the damage from spreading any further. Musk was accustomed to navigating tough situations, but this was different. This wasn't just a media storm. This was a legal battle that could destroy his reputation and, potentially, his company's. Gwynne Shotwell, who had always been a rock for Musk, was at his side through every step of the crisis. She had seen SpaceX through so many challenges, but this was a new kind of fight. "Elon," she said, as they sat in his office later that afternoon, "we need to be transparent. The more we try to hide behind lawyers or spin this, the worse it's going to get. People need to know where we stand." Musk rubbed his temples. "I know. But this is a personal attack. They're accusing me of something I didn't do. I never misled anyone." Gwynne met his gaze, her expression resolute. "The problem is, Elon, that perception is reality. No one remembers the nuance of a lawsuit. All they see is the headline." Over the next few days, Musk's team worked tirelessly to mount a defense, but the media frenzy was relentless. The allegations seemed to have a life of their own, and even Musk's carefully crafted image of a visionary entrepreneur was being chipped away at. He had always known that taking risks came with consequences. But the scale of this challenge was unlike anything he had faced before. The fact that he had built something as monumental as SpaceX and Tesla now felt almost irrelevant in the face of these legal accusations. At the same time, he found himself unable to fully let go of the grip on his companies. Despite his attempts at delegating responsibility, he found himself reading every update, issuing new directions, and contacting his lawyers for the latest developments. It was as if the weight of the world was once again on his shoulders. The public was split. Some stood by Musk, convinced that the charges were politically motivated, that he was being targeted because of his unconventional style, his immense wealth, and his unfiltered persona. Others, however, began to wonder if there was some truth to the accusations. Was the great Elon Musk really a fraud? Grimes reached out to him again, sensing the toll the situation was taking on him. Their relationship, which had already been strained by his obsessive drive, was now on the verge of collapse. "Elon," she texted, "we need to talk. This is eating you alive. You need to step back." Musk sat alone in his office, staring at the message. He had been so focused on the chaos of the past few days that he hadn't stopped to consider how much it was affecting his personal life. Grimes was right. His drive to fix everything had consumed him completely, and in doing so, he had allowed his most important relationships to suffer. The weight of it all came to a head during a phone call with his children's mother, Tallulah Riley. She expressed concern over the toll the situation was taking on Musk's well-being. "Elon, you're not okay. This stress, this pressure, it's not healthy. You've always been so determined to prove yourself, but you can't keep going at this pace." Her words stung, but they also resonated. Musk had always been obsessed with proving that he could succeed where others had failed, but perhaps he had lost sight of the people he was fighting for in the process. "Elon, you need to take care of yourself," Tallulah continued. "Everything else can wait. Your health, your family, those are the things that matter." But even in the face of mounting stress, Musk couldn't walk away. He couldn't retreat from the fight. The thought of losing everything he had built, of his vision crumbling into the hands of his critics, was simply unbearable. "I'll fix this," he muttered to himself, over and over again, like a mantra. And as the days dragged on, Musk found himself facing the darkest chapter of his journey yet, a battle for his future, his reputation, and his legacy. It was a reckoning he had never anticipated, but it was one he would have to face head-on. The question now was whether he could rise from the ashes of this scandal, or whether it would be the end of his incredible story. But as the legal battles loomed, one thing was certain: Elon Musk's world was on the verge of being forever changed. The days leading up to the court case were filled with sleepless nights, endless meetings, and a growing sense of unease. Elon Musk had weathered many storms in his life: failed rocket launches, the constant pressure of managing $2 billion companies, and the intense scrutiny of being one of the most public figures in the world. But this was different. This time, it wasn't just about his companies. It was about his personal credibility, his legacy, and the future he had worked so hard to build. The trial was scheduled to begin in just a few days, and the media circus surrounding the case had reached a fever pitch. The world was watching, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. Musk knew that if he lost this battle, the fallout would be catastrophic. But even more than that, there was the question that gnawed at him every waking moment: could he rebuild after this? Could he, and his companies, survive this public humiliation? His legal team, led by one of the top defense lawyers in the country, had been working tirelessly on their strategy. They were confident that they could win. Elon Musk was innocent, after all. But the question remained, would the court see it that way? Sitting in his office late one night, Musk glanced at the stack of legal papers in front of him. He had always prided himself on being the one who solved problems, the one who found innovative solutions to seemingly impossible challenges. But this was different. This wasn't a problem that could be solved with technology or rockets or even the boundless energy he usually poured into his work. This was a problem that required a very different kind of skill, a skill that didn't come as naturally to him: humility. The team around him, his legal counsel, his PR team, his closest advisors, had all urged him to lay low, to take a step back and let the legal process unfold without making any more public statements. But that wasn't Musk's style. He was a fighter. He had spent his entire career challenging the status quo, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. He had no intention of rolling over now. In the days leading up to the trial, Musk made several public appearances, standing firm in his innocence and in his belief that the charges were baseless. But as the trial loomed closer, his public relations team started to worry. The media had already painted him as a villain. Every word he spoke seemed to be dissected, taken out of context, and used against him. He was no longer just an entrepreneur, he was a symbol of controversy, a figure whose every action was under a microscope. Finally, the day arrived. The courtroom was packed, the media frenzy outside was at an all-time high, and the energy in the room was palpable. Musk's legal team had prepared for months, carefully crafting their case. But no matter how solid their defense was, Musk knew that it wasn't just about the evidence, it was about how he came across to the jury, to the judge, and to the public. Musk sat quietly in the courtroom, surrounded by his legal team. His usual confidence had been replaced by a strange stillness. It was one thing to fight against rocket failure or economic downturns, but this was a different kind of battle. This was personal. As the judge entered the room, the proceedings began. Musk's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay composed. His lawyers presented their opening statements, laying out a defense that was built on the premise that the allegations were exaggerated and that there was no intent to deceive anyone. Musk's legal team argued that his comments had been taken out of context and that any discrepancies were due to misinterpretations, not deliberate fraud. But the prosecution wasn't backing down. They had their own narrative, one that painted Musk as a reckless billionaire who had used his public persona to manipulate stock prices and mislead investors. They focused on the tweets, the statements Musk had made about Tesla's production numbers and stock prices, claiming that these statements had been false and had misled the public. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the prosecution was doing everything in their power to make Musk look like a man who had no regard for the truth. Only for his own success. They questioned him relentlessly, challenging every statement he had made, every decision he had taken. Musk took the stand on the third day of the trial. The moment he stepped up to the witness stand, the room fell silent. His eyes locked with the judge, and for the first time in his career, he felt exposed. He had always been in control, always been the one with the answers, the one in charge. But today, he was vulnerable. "Mr. Musk," the prosecutor began, "you tweeted in 2018 that Tesla was going private at $420 a share, and that you had secured the funding. Do you stand by that statement?" Musk took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Yes, I stand by that statement. But the context was misunderstood. I had discussions with potential investors, and I was trying to share my optimism about the future of Tesla. It was not meant to mislead anyone. The prosecutor pressed on. And you did not inform your board or your investors about these plans before making that public statement, correct? Musk's mind raced, but he held firm. That's correct. The tweet was an attempt to communicate my belief in Tesla's future. I made an error in judgment, but it was not an attempt to deceive anyone. The prosecutor wasn't satisfied. So, you admit that you acted recklessly? Musk paused, the weight of the question hanging in the air. I admit that I acted impulsively, but I did not act with malice. I believed at the time that I was doing what was best for Tesla. The questions continued, and Musk's answers were measured, but it was clear that he was starting to feel the strain. The courtroom was a battleground, and every word he spoke was dissected and scrutinized. His legal team fought back fiercely, but the prosecution's narrative had already taken hold in the media, and the public's perception was rapidly shifting. As the judge entered the room, the proceedings began. Musk's heart raced, but he forced himself to stay composed. His lawyers presented their opening statements, laying out a defense that was built on the premise that the allegations were exaggerated and that there was no intent to deceive anyone. Musk's legal team argued that his comments had been taken out of context and that any discrepancies were due to misinterpretations, not deliberate fraud. But the prosecution wasn't backing down. They had their own narrative, one that painted Musk as a reckless billionaire who had used his public persona to manipulate stock prices and mislead investors. They focused on the tweets, the statements Musk had made about Tesla's production numbers and stock prices, claiming that these statements had been false and had misled the public. As the trial progressed, it became clear that the prosecution was doing everything in their power to make Musk look like a man who had no regard for the truth. Only for his own success. They questioned him relentlessly, challenging every statement he had made, every decision he had taken. Musk took the stand on the third day of the trial. The moment he stepped up to the witness stand, the room fell silent. His eyes locked with the judge, and for the first time in his career, he felt exposed. He had always been in control, always been the one with the answers, the one in charge. But today, he was vulnerable. Mr. Musk, the prosecutor began, you tweeted in 2018 that Tesla was going private at $420 a share, and that you had secured the funding. Do you stand by that statement? Musk took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Yes, I stand by that statement. But the context was misunderstood. I had discussions with potential investors, and I was trying to share my optimism about the future of Tesla. It was not meant to mislead anyone. The prosecutor pressed on. And you did not inform your board or your investors about these plans before making that public statement, correct? Musk's mind raced, but he held firm. That's correct. The tweet was an attempt to communicate my belief in Tesla's future. I made an error in judgment, but it was not an attempt to deceive anyone. The prosecutor wasn't satisfied. So, you admit that you acted recklessly? Musk paused, the weight of the question hanging in the air. I admit that I acted impulsively, but I did not act with malice. I believed at the time that I was doing what was best for Tesla. The questions continued, and Musk's answers were measured, but it was clear that he was starting to feel the strain. The courtroom was a battleground, and every word he spoke was dissected and scrutinized. His legal team fought back fiercely, but the prosecution's narrative had already taken hold in the media, and the public's perception was rapidly shifting. Despite all of this, Musk's defense team remained confident. They argued that Musk had never intended to deceive anyone, that he was simply trying to share his vision for Tesla's future. They presented evidence that Musk had, at times, been overly optimistic, but that optimism had never crossed the line into fraud. The challenge, however, was not just proving that Musk hadn't acted with malicious intent, it was convincing the jury that Musk's actions, even if they had been impulsive or reckless, were not a deliberate attempt to deceive. As the days turned into weeks, it became clear that the case was not just about Tesla and Musk's controversial tweets, it was about something bigger. The media had turned Musk into a symbol of the excesses of Silicon Valley, a representative of the tech elite who played by their own rules, unchecked and unaccountable. The prosecution seized on this narrative, presenting Musk as the embodiment of everything that was wrong with the modern business world. It wasn't just a case about misleading investors, it was a case about the dangers of unchecked power and ambition. But Musk wasn't just a businessman anymore. He was a symbol of something larger, of progress, innovation, and a future that no one had dared to imagine until he came along. SpaceX was building the future of space exploration, and Tesla was leading the charge in electric vehicles. The world was looking to him to change things, to break through barriers that no one else had the courage to even try to breach. The trial was not only about whether Musk had lied, it was about whether his vision, his audacity, and his dream were worth the price he had to pay. Could a man who had changed the world for the better really be brought down for a moment of impulsive overconfidence? Then came the moment that no one had expected. In the middle of the trial, as Musk's legal team was preparing for their closing argument, a new development emerged. One of the key witnesses for the prosecution, a former Tesla employee, came forward with new evidence that cast doubt on the allegations against Musk. The witness claimed that Musk had not acted alone in his public statements but had, in fact, been influenced by a group of investors who were just as eager to see Tesla's stock rise as he was. This new evidence sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Musk's legal team seized on this new information, arguing that if the prosecution's case rested on the assumption that Musk had acted alone, then the entire foundation of their argument was flawed. It wasn't just Musk who had been involved in the decisions surrounding Tesla's stock, it was a group of people, all with a vested interest in the company's success. This was the turning point. The sudden revelation turned the tide in Musk's favor. The jury, who had been skeptical of Musk's intentions, began to see the complexity of the situation. It was no longer a simple case of a billionaire making reckless statements. Instead, it was a case of a group of people, all trying to push the boundaries of what was possible, all with a common goal, success. Musk could hardly believe what was happening. The prosecution had been blindsided, and the defense was now in a position to argue that the entire case had been built on an oversimplified narrative. For the first time in weeks, Musk allowed himself a small glimmer of hope. He wasn't out of the woods yet, but the odds had shifted in his favor. As the trial neared its conclusion, Musk's team presented their closing arguments. They emphasized Musk's visionary leadership, his commitment to creating something bigger than himself, and his unrelenting pursuit of the future. They painted a picture of a man who had sometimes made mistakes, but who had never intentionally misled anyone. Musk's passion for his companies and his drive to push the boundaries of technology were his guiding principles, not personal gain. Back in his office, alone for the first time in days, Musk sat in front of his desk, staring at the dimming light outside. The events of the past few weeks had been a roller coaster of emotions, a constant back and forth between hope and despair. He had faced moments of doubt, of uncertainty, but he had also felt moments of clarity. The trial had tested him in ways he never expected, but it had also shown him something he hadn't realized before, how much he truly cared about the companies he had built. He wasn't just fighting for his own reputation anymore. He was fighting for the people who had believed in him, for the employees who had dedicated their lives to SpaceX and Tesla, and for the future that he had promised to create. For the first time in weeks, Musk felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel: peace. He knew that whatever the outcome of the trial, he had given everything he had. And that, in the end, was all anyone could ask for. The jury's deliberation was still underway, but Musk felt ready to face whatever came next. He had fought for his legacy, for his vision, and for the future he believed in. Now, all that was left was to wait. And as he sat there in the silence of his office, a single thought echoed in his mind: no matter what happens, the journey isn't over yet. The tension in the air was palpable as Elon Musk sat in the courtroom, his hands resting on his lap, his gaze fixed ahead. The courtroom was unusually quiet, save for the occasional shuffle of papers or the low murmur of conversation among the lawyers. Musk had been through a lot in the past few weeks. The trial, the public scrutiny, the stress, it had all built to this moment. The jury had finally retired to deliberate, and now, he was waiting for them to return with their verdict. It had been a long, exhausting journey, and now all Musk could do was sit, reflect, and wait. Musk's mind wandered back to the beginning of it all, the tweet that had started the firestorm. It had seemed so innocent at the time. A tweet about taking Tesla private at $420 a share, with funding secured. But what had followed was a whirlwind of legal battles, public scrutiny, and an investigation that had put him and his companies under the microscope. He had spent the last few years building his empire, revolutionizing the electric vehicle industry, and pushing the boundaries of space exploration. But all of that had been overshadowed by a single, impulsive tweet. The hardest part of it all wasn't the courtroom drama or the harsh cross-examinations, it was the feeling of being misunderstood. Musk had always viewed himself as a disruptor, a visionary, someone who challenged the status quo. But to the world, he was starting to look more like a reckless billionaire playing fast and loose with the truth. As the minutes stretched into hours, the courtroom began to fill up with more people. The families of the jurors had gathered, and reporters filled every available space, eagerly awaiting the decision. Musk's legal team remained stoic, their faces unreadable. Even though they had a solid defense, no one could predict what the jury would decide. Finally, the moment arrived. The door to the jury room opened, and the jury foreman walked in with a piece of paper in hand. The room grew even quieter as everyone turned their attention to the foreman. Musk's heart raced, his palms sweaty, but he remained still, as if trying to brace himself for whatever was about to come. The judge cleared his throat, signaling the foreman to speak. "We, the jury, find the defendant Elon Musk." The word seemed to stretch out, dragging on forever. Musk's pulse quickened as the foreman continued. "Not guilty of all charges." For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. Musk blinked, unsure if he had heard the words correctly. His mind struggled to process the outcome. Not guilty. The weight of the words crashed down on him. A wave of relief, mixed with disbelief, washed over him. It was over. He had been vindicated. As the judge nodded, signaling the end of the proceedings, Musk could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He looked around the courtroom, at the faces of his legal team, his family, and the reporters who had been watching this entire spectacle unfold. The courtroom erupted into a mix of murmurs and hushed conversations, but Musk barely noticed. He was still processing what had just happened. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was something deeper than that. Musk had been through the ringer over the past few months, emotionally, mentally, and professionally. He had been painted as a villain, a man who put his ego before everything else. But now, the world had heard his side of the story, and the jury had sided with him. It was a triumph, yes, but it was also a moment of reflection. He had won. But the question was, what now? As Musk left the courtroom, the flash of cameras and the shouts of reporters filled the air. He had always been at the center of the media storm, but today, it felt different. Today, he was no longer the defendant in a courtroom drama, he was a free man, a man who had faced down the most serious charges of his career and come out victorious. But even as he smiled for the cameras, part of him knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. The public's perception of him would not change overnight. The media would continue to scrutinize every move he made. He would still be a target for those who wanted to see him fail. Back at his office, Musk sat in the dim light of his desk, staring out at the city below. He was tired, bone-deep tired, but his mind was still racing. He had always believed in his ability to solve problems, to push past obstacles, to change the world. But today, as the dust settled, he couldn't help but wonder if the most important lesson he had learned during this ordeal wasn't about business or innovation, but about himself. He had been forced to confront the limits of his own ambition. He had been humbled, yes, but he had also realized something profound: the journey was never just about success. It was about the people he had brought along with him, the vision he had shared, and the purpose that had driven him from the very beginning. His companies, his teams, and his supporters were more important than any tweet or any headline. Musk took a deep breath and reached for his phone. He had one message that stood out: his legal team had just confirmed that the settlement with the SEC was finally complete. The fine was substantial, but it was nothing compared to the weight that had been lifted from his shoulders. The battle was over. As the night wore on, Musk found himself reflecting on what had truly been at stake in this fight. It wasn't just his reputation or his wealth, it was the future he had built. His ability to innovate, to take risks, and to lead his companies forward had never been in question. But now, with this verdict behind him, he could see the road ahead more clearly. He was ready for the next challenge, whatever it may be. The court case had been a turning point in Musk's life, a moment of reckoning, a test of character, and a reminder that even the most visionary leaders aren't immune to failure or misjudgment. But through it all, Musk had come out stronger, more focused, and more determined to continue pushing the boundaries of what was possible. And as he closed his eyes that night, he knew one thing for sure: the journey had only just begun. The days after the trial had passed in a blur. While the media celebrated Musk's acquittal, many of the journalists who had followed the case were quick to move on to the next headline. But for Musk, the aftermath of the trial wasn't just about his own personal victory, it was about the ripple effects that would echo through his companies and the tech world for months to come. Despite the legal triumph, the tension was far from over. Tesla's stock price had been volatile during the trial, and though Musk had been cleared of all charges, the long-term damage to the company's reputation was still a concern. Investors had been shaken by the uncertainty surrounding Musk's leadership. And while the acquittal was a relief, it didn't erase the months of scrutiny and public doubt that Tesla had endured. Musk was no stranger to criticism, it had followed him for years. But this time felt different. The media, the pundits, and even some of his most ardent supporters had begun to question whether the price of his ambition was too high. Was it worth it? Was he willing to continue down this path, knowing the risks involved? These questions haunted him, even as he kept his focus on the horizon. Back at SpaceX, there was a different kind of atmosphere. The team was as focused as ever, working tirelessly toward the next big milestone, Mars. Musk had long believed that humanity's future lay beyond Earth, and SpaceX was his vehicle for getting there. The company had made incredible strides with the Starship program, and despite the distractions of the trial, Musk's passion for space exploration hadn't wavered. But now, as Musk sat in the quiet of his office late one night, he found himself lost in thought. The weight of the trial still lingered, and he couldn't help but wonder if he had been too reckless, too impulsive, at times. Had he sacrificed too much for the sake of innovation? Had he put too many people at risk in pursuit of his grand vision? It was a moment of introspection that he hadn't allowed himself in years. He looked out the window of his office, the city lights twinkling in the distance. The world was moving forward, and so was he. But it wasn't just about moving fast anymore, it was about moving with purpose. At Tesla, the story was similar. The company had continued to innovate during the trial, unveiling new advancements in battery technology and autonomous driving software. But the corporate environment had shifted. Employees were more cautious, investors were jittery, and the board members were beginning to ask tough questions. Musk was no longer the invincible CEO, he was a man who had been tested, who had come out on top, but who had also shown his vulnerabilities. Elon Musk had built Tesla into a global powerhouse, but the company was beginning to show signs of strain. The rapid expansion of its factories, the push for full autonomy, and the pressure to remain ahead of competitors had created an environment of relentless speed. And now, with the trial behind him, Musk was forced to confront the question he had avoided for years: could Tesla sustain this pace? It was in these quieter moments, away from the cameras and the headlines, that Musk began to think about the future in a new light. The trial had forced him to reevaluate his priorities, not just as a business leader, but as a person. The drive to innovate had always been his compass, but now, he realized that there needed to be balance. The risks he had taken had changed the trajectory of the industries he had touched, but they had also left a trail of destruction in their wake, both for him personally and for the people around him. The pressure of the spotlight, the scrutiny of his every move, the constant criticism, it had all taken a toll. And while Musk had always thrived on challenges, he realized that no one could carry the weight of the world forever. There had to be a better way forward, a way that didn't sacrifice personal well-being for the sake of ambition. A few days after the verdict, Musk took an unexpected step. He called a meeting with Tesla's board members and some of his closest advisors. For the first time in years, he spoke not just about the company's trajectory, but about his own future, about what he wanted to achieve, what kind of leader he wanted to be, and the balance he needed in his life. "We've been pushing hard, but at what cost?" Musk asked, his voice steady but reflective. "I've been so focused on reaching for the stars that I've lost sight of the ground beneath me. We need to take a step back and rethink how we're building Tesla, not just for the future of the company, but for the people who've made it what it is." The room was quiet as his words hung in the air. His advisors and board members exchanged glances, but none spoke up immediately. Musk wasn't known for admitting vulnerability, but today he had done just that. The man who had once been unstoppable, a force of nature whose vision of the future had reshaped entire industries, was now questioning how much he could, and should, sacrifice. Meanwhile, the public perception of Musk had shifted. While some still saw him as the reckless billionaire who had courted controversy at every turn, others began to view him differently. The trial had revealed a side of Musk that was more human than many had expected. He wasn't invincible. He made mistakes. He was, in many ways, just like everyone else. But it was this humanity, this vulnerability, that began to endear him to people who had once criticized him relentlessly. Social media, which had been a battleground for Musk's detractors, began to shift in his favor. Some even started to praise him for standing up to the system, for fighting back against the powerful forces that sought to bring him down. His supporters saw him not just as a businessman, but as a symbol of resilience, someone who had faced immense pressure and emerged victorious, not without scars, but with an unwavering resolve to continue pushing forward. But the change in public perception wasn't enough to erase the underlying issues. Musk's legal troubles had cost him, not just in terms of money, but in terms of his personal life. His relationships with family and friends had been strained, and his focus on his companies had come at the expense of everything else. The road to redemption was not going to be easy. As Musk looked ahead, he knew the challenges were far from over. The world had been watching, and they weren't going to let him forget the controversy that had surrounded his name. But for the first time in a long while, Musk felt ready to embrace the journey ahead, not just as a businessman, but as a man who had been through the fire and emerged stronger. The road to recovery, both personally and professionally, would be long. But Musk was determined to walk it, not for the sake of fame or fortune, but for something more profound. For the first time in his life, Musk understood that success wasn't just about reaching the stars. It was about building something that would last, something that would endure long after the spotlight faded. And with that realization, Musk began the next chapter of his journey. The days following the trial verdict had been a whirlwind of activity. Musk had spent hours in meetings with Tesla's board and SpaceX executives, evaluating the future of his companies and his role within them. The weight of his newfound perspective loomed heavily on him. It was clear to him now, to build something that would stand the test of time, he would have to do more than just push boundaries, he would have to lead with a sense of balance and purpose, not just ambition. Tesla had always been his passion project, but after the chaos of the trial, Musk was forced to confront some hard truths about the company's direction. He had always been focused on innovation, on the drive to create the world's best electric car, the best autonomous driving system, and the most cutting-edge battery technology. But now, in the quiet moments of introspection, Musk realized that Tesla's growth had come at a cost, both for him personally and for the company's employees. The energy in the Tesla offices had shifted. Musk could feel it. A certain tension hung in the air that hadn't been there before. While the company had made huge strides in revolutionizing the automotive industry, the recent public scrutiny had shaken the confidence of many of Tesla's most dedicated workers. Some employees had started questioning their commitment to the company, uncertain about the future and Musk's ability to lead without the distractions of the media circus. For the first time, Musk had to face the possibility that his leadership style, his relentless pace, his grand vision, might have pushed people too hard. At the next Tesla board meeting, Musk spoke openly about the changes he believed were necessary for the company's long-term success. "We can't continue at this pace forever," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We've built something incredible here, but we're at a crossroads. If we're going to keep innovating, keep growing, we need to focus on creating an environment where people can thrive, not just work hard, but feel supported, valued." There was a moment of silence around the table as his words settled in. Musk had always been the visionary, the risk-taker, the leader who pushed his team to their limits. But now, he was suggesting something different, a more sustainable approach to leadership. The board members exchanged looks, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. This wasn't the Elon Musk they were used to, the man who had lived and breathed his work, who had made Tesla's fast-paced growth and success synonymous with his name. Was this a temporary shift, or was it a sign of something deeper? "Are you saying we slow down?" one of the senior engineers asked cautiously. "No," Musk replied, shaking his head. "What I'm saying is we need to be smarter about how we grow. We need to think about the people who are making this happen, the engineers, the designers, the production workers. They deserve more than just to be seen as cogs in a machine. We need to give them the space to succeed, to fail, and to learn. And we need to make sure we have the right structure in place to support them." The conversation that followed was a revelation. Musk, the man who had built Tesla on the foundation of his unwavering drive and vision, was now talking about building a culture of support and collaboration. It was a stark contrast to the cutthroat, high-pressure environment that had characterized much of Tesla's early years. But it was also a sign of growth, both for Musk as a leader and for the company. After the meeting, Musk made an unexpected decision. He reached out to some of Tesla's top engineers and asked for their honest feedback on the company's culture, work-life balance, and the challenges they were facing. He wanted to hear from them, directly, about the struggles they were dealing with, not just from the perspective of a CEO, but as someone who had been where they were. Working in the trenches, pushing to meet deadlines, juggling multiple priorities. What he heard surprised him. Many of the engineers and employees expressed frustration with the constant pressure to meet deadlines and produce results. They felt overworked and underappreciated. They respected Musk's vision, but they also craved a more balanced approach, where their personal lives and well-being were prioritized alongside their work. Musk listened. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to truly absorb the feedback, to let it sink in. It was a difficult pill to swallow. His drive had always been his greatest strength, but it had also been his greatest weakness. He realized that if he wanted to lead Tesla into the future, he would have to do it differently, he would have to adapt, to evolve. As Musk worked to implement these changes at Tesla, he also turned his attention to SpaceX. The company had been on an incredible trajectory, with the Mars mission progressing at a pace that few had thought possible. But even SpaceX, with its ambitious goals and groundbreaking technologies, wasn't immune to the challenges Musk had faced with Tesla. He scheduled a meeting with his SpaceX leadership team, and once again, he found himself addressing the question of balance. SpaceX had a similar culture, fast-paced, innovative, and focused on the long-term goal of making life multiplanetary. But Musk knew that he couldn't keep pushing people to their limits without consequences. "We have to remember that we're all in this together," Musk told his team, leaning forward in his chair. "The work we're doing is incredibly important, but we need to make sure we're taking care of each other. SpaceX is going to change the world, but we can't do that if we burn out." The team responded positively. There was a sense of relief in the room. They had always admired Musk's vision, but many of them had also felt the weight of the pressure he had put on them. Musk had built an empire with his relentless ambition, but now it was clear that for these companies to thrive in the long run, they needed more than just groundbreaking technology, they needed a culture that fostered collaboration, support, and sustainability. Over the next few months, Musk worked tirelessly to reshape Tesla and SpaceX's internal cultures. He hired new HR leaders to focus on employee well-being, and he implemented programs to improve work-life balance. He also made a conscious effort to spend more time listening to his teams, making sure they felt heard and valued. It wasn't an easy transition. Old habits were hard to break, and some employees were skeptical of the changes. But slowly, Musk began to see the results. The atmosphere at Tesla became more positive, and employees seemed more energized and committed to their work. At SpaceX, the shift was similarly noticeable. Teams were collaborating more effectively, and the innovation continued at a steady pace. For Musk, the process was a humbling one. He had always prided himself on being a visionary, a trailblazer, and a force of nature. But now, he realized that true leadership wasn't just about setting a course for the future, it was about guiding the people who would help him get there. It was about creating an environment where everyone could succeed, not just him. As he sat in his office one evening, looking over the progress of both companies, Musk felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The journey wasn't over, there was still so much to accomplish, so many challenges to overcome. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was on the right path. The road ahead would be difficult, but Musk knew one thing for certain, it was a road he was ready to walk, not alone, but with the people who had supported him, and with a newfound sense of purpose. As the months rolled on, Elon Musk's focus shifted towards something much bigger than the companies he had built. His earlier struggles, the pressure of the trial, the restructuring of Tesla and SpaceX, all began to converge on one central thought, his legacy. What would he leave behind? What impact would he have on the world long after his name faded from the headlines? Musk had always been driven by the desire to change the course of history, to make a lasting difference. But as he restructured his companies and adapted his leadership style, he couldn't help but feel an increasing urgency about how the world would remember him. The concept of legacy had never been far from his mind, but now, with his priorities realigned, Musk found himself grappling with questions of purpose that were more profound than ever before. He had succeeded in pushing the boundaries of space exploration, renewable energy, and electric vehicles. Yet, despite his unparalleled success, Musk couldn't help but wonder if it was all enough. Would he be remembered as a genius innovator, or as a ruthless businessman? A visionary, or someone who had sacrificed too much for his ambitions? In a rare interview for a prestigious magazine, Musk was asked directly about his legacy. He paused for a long time, looking out the window of his office, before responding. "I don't know how I'll be remembered," he said, his voice steady. "I hope people remember me as someone who cared about the future. Someone who pushed the limits of what was possible because I truly believed in a better world. But I also hope people will understand the cost of that pursuit. It's not easy. It's not always pretty. But if we're going to make the world better, we have to be willing to take the risks." His words resonated with many. The public's perception of Musk had shifted dramatically in the past year. Once a controversial figure, admired by some and despised by others, Musk now stood as a symbol of resilience and evolution. His willingness to adjust, to show vulnerability, had earned him respect in ways that his previous bravado never could. But the question of legacy loomed larger than ever. At Tesla, the changes Musk had implemented were beginning to pay off. Employee morale had improved significantly, and the company's production lines were more efficient than ever. The introduction of new vehicle models, the expansion of global factories, and the increase in production capacity all pointed toward a strong future for Tesla. Investors, initially skeptical after the trial, were starting to see the long-term value in Musk's vision. The electric vehicle market had become a major force, and Tesla was at the forefront of it. But despite the positive momentum at Tesla, Musk was still worried. He could feel the pressure mounting as the company scaled at an unprecedented rate. The expectations were higher than ever. He wasn't just leading a company anymore, he was leading a movement. Every decision, every new innovation, had the power to reshape industries and influence the future. There was a palpable weight to it all. SpaceX, too, had made remarkable progress in its mission to make life multiplanetary. The development of Starship was advancing, and Musk was now closer than ever to realizing his dream of sending humans to Mars. SpaceX had become a symbol of what was possible when ambition met unwavering determination. Yet, even as the company prepared for its most ambitious mission, Musk couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Perhaps it was because the focus on Mars, on humanity's future beyond Earth, had taken up so much of his time and energy. While he was consumed by the goal of space exploration, Musk realized that he had neglected one of his other passions, education. For as long as Musk could remember, he had always been fascinated by the potential of human intellect and innovation. He believed deeply that education was the key to unlocking humanity's full potential. But despite his efforts to innovate in various industries, he had not yet fully ventured into the world of education. This, Musk realized, was a vital part of the legacy he wanted to build. He began to explore ideas for an educational initiative that would revolutionize the way children and young adults learned. For Musk, this wasn't about building a business empire, it was about giving future generations the tools they needed to understand and shape the world. It would be a system that focused on hands-on, problem-solving learning, designed to inspire the same creativity and out-of-the-box thinking that had driven his own success. But creating an educational revolution would be no easy task. Musk understood that the current education system was deeply entrenched, with rigid structures that left little room for the kind of innovation he envisioned. The system needed a complete overhaul, from the way curricula were designed to the way students interacted with teachers and technology. He started working with a small team of educators and technologists to begin laying the groundwork for this new educational platform. They dreamed of a world where children weren't just learning from textbooks but were immersed in environments that encouraged critical thinking, creativity, and collaboration. Musk's vision was ambitious, even by his own standards. It was a dream that might take decades to realize, but he was determined to bring it to life. As he focused on this new project, Musk's role in his existing companies continued to evolve. He wasn't stepping away from Tesla or SpaceX, but he had begun to delegate more responsibility to his trusted teams. At Tesla, the transition of leadership had become smoother, with key executives stepping up to take charge of daily operations. SpaceX, too, had matured into a well-oiled machine, with its own leadership structure in place to handle the complexities of the Mars mission. But as the day-to-day operations of his companies became less reliant on him, Musk found that he had more time to focus on his long-term vision. This shift allowed him to explore projects that had always been near and dear to his heart, projects that had been sidelined during the years of intense focus on his tech companies. The new educational initiative was just the beginning. Musk began to invest in other areas of human potential, including healthcare and renewable energy, further cementing his position as a forward-thinking leader. He believed that these industries were just as critical to humanity's future as space exploration. And in many ways, they were interconnected. Musk's renewed focus on these areas signaled a new chapter in his career, one where he wasn't just pushing the envelope in business and technology, but also considering the broader implications of his work on the world. His legacy was beginning to take shape in ways that no one had expected. It wasn't just about rockets and electric cars, it was about reshaping society in a way that would improve the lives of future generations. As he stood at the podium at an international conference, unveiling his vision for the future of education, Musk felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in years. The crowd listened intently as he outlined his plan to revolutionize learning, his eyes alight with the same passion that had once driven him to revolutionize the automotive industry. The world was changing, and Musk was at the forefront of it. But this time, the change wasn't just about technology. It was about people. About shaping minds, about creating opportunities for the next generation to thrive in a rapidly evolving world. For the first time in a long while, Musk felt at peace with his legacy. It wasn't a singular achievement or a single invention that would define him. It was the collective impact of his work, the industries he had transformed, the people he had inspired, and the world he had helped shape for future generations. And with that, he knew his true work was just beginning. Despite Elon Musk's ambitious strides toward reshaping his legacy, the pressure of the past years soon proved too great to ignore. While Tesla and SpaceX thrived, new challenges were emerging on the horizon, ones that Musk hadn't fully anticipated. The tension in the world economy was escalating, with unpredictable market fluctuations, rising global tensions, and an increasing backlash against the influence of tech giants. For Musk, the news came in waves. On one hand, SpaceX's Mars program was continuing its forward momentum, but on the other, global competition in the electric vehicle market was growing fiercer by the day. It was clear that Tesla's reign as the leader in the electric vehicle industry was no longer as secure as it had been in years past. The success of new competitors like Rivian, Lucid Motors, and even established automotive giants like Ford and General Motors entering the electric vehicle market meant that Tesla had to fight harder for its market share. Musk had always embraced competition, but he knew the pressure was intensifying. Tesla had been a pioneer, but the rise of competitors forced Musk to rethink his strategies. Tesla's once unassailable position in the EV market was now being challenged in ways Musk hadn't experienced before. The global supply chain disruptions also continued to cause delays in production, further slowing Tesla's progress. However, the most immediate threat came from the regulatory scrutiny that began to escalate against Musk's companies. Governments worldwide were beginning to question the practices of tech giants more rigorously, particularly when it came to data privacy, environmental sustainability, and the control these companies held over key sectors of the economy. SpaceX was facing increasing scrutiny over its potential to monopolize space travel, with new space agencies and private enterprises emerging. Meanwhile, Tesla's growing influence was drawing attention from regulators concerned about its impact on the automotive industry. A particularly biting blow came when the European Union announced a new set of environmental regulations that would affect Tesla's production line and its plans for expansion into the European market. The new rules were stringent, focusing on both manufacturing emissions and consumer safety. Musk knew that these regulations could delay Tesla's plans and force the company to incur significant additional costs. At the same time, social pressure was mounting around Musk's leadership style. While he had garnered admiration for his resilience and his unapologetic drive to succeed, his unorthodox behavior and sometimes abrasive communication style were beginning to rub people the wrong way, especially in the context of the new corporate climate that demanded greater accountability from its leaders. The public's adoration of Musk's maverick persona was fading, replaced by growing calls for more responsible leadership. The storm reached its peak when a series of high-profile scandals surfaced, both within Tesla and SpaceX. There were rumors of internal conflicts at Tesla regarding workplace culture, employee dissatisfaction, and growing concerns over burnout. At SpaceX, an accident during a test launch, while minor, made headlines and caused significant public concern about the company's safety protocols. Musk was no stranger to controversies. After all, his entire career had been built on pushing the limits and challenging the status quo. However, these crises were different. They were about perception, not just performance. The stakes had become higher. The world was watching, and the world's expectations had changed. Musk wasn't just a billionaire entrepreneur anymore, he was a global figure, a symbol of the future. And the cracks in his empire were starting to show. In the midst of this crisis, Musk's mental and emotional state began to deteriorate. He had always been able to thrive under pressure, but now it felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. His companies, his employees, and the future of humanity's technological progress were all tied to his success, and failure was not an option. He began isolating himself from his team, spending long hours alone, wrestling with the complexities of the situation. Even as he attempted to steer his companies through these tumultuous times, he could feel his control slipping away. Every decision seemed more critical, every move more public. He had always been able to rally his teams around his vision, but now it felt as though they were looking to him for answers he didn't have. One evening, As Musk sat in his office, staring at a holographic map of Mars, a visualization of SpaceX's plans to eventually colonize the planet, he was interrupted by a call from his close friend and confidant, Gwynne Shotwell, the president of SpaceX. Shotwell had been instrumental in SpaceX's growth and was one of the few people Musk trusted to speak candidly with him. "Elon, we need to talk," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "The pressure's building up, and I'm concerned about you. You've got to find a way to deal with all of this. You can't carry it all on your own." Musk sighed deeply. "I know, but I don't see any way out. Every direction I look, there's a new challenge. If we don't act fast, it could all come crashing down. I've pushed myself and everyone else so hard, and now I'm watching everything slip away." Shotwell's tone softened. "You've built this, Elon. But no one expects you to be perfect. What you need is to trust your team more. You've built something extraordinary, but you can't do it all yourself. Let go of some of the weight. Let the people who believe in this mission help carry it." Musk paused for a long time, the weight of Shotwell's words sinking in. He had always prided himself on doing the impossible, on taking on challenges no one else could. But Shotwell was right, he couldn't carry the entire world on his shoulders. The key to SpaceX's future, and the future of his other ventures, was not in his ability to lead alone but in his ability to lead together with his team. The next few days were a turning point for Musk. He made several decisions that would define the future of his companies. At Tesla, he stepped back from the day-to-day operations even further, appointing a new chief operating officer to oversee production and supply chain management. At SpaceX, he announced the creation of a new leadership council, composed of top engineers, astronauts, and executives, who would help guide the company through its most critical phases. Musk also made a public statement, acknowledging the growing concerns and challenges. He admitted that he had made mistakes and promised to refocus his efforts on the long-term goals of his companies, while making room for a more balanced leadership approach. It was a rare moment of vulnerability for Musk, but it was a critical one. The world had seen him as a near-invincible force, but this admission of struggle humanized him in a way that had been previously impossible. The media storm that followed Musk's statements was intense. Some praised him for his honesty and willingness to evolve, while others remained skeptical, questioning whether his changes would be enough to turn things around. But for Musk, the most important change wasn't the public's perception, it was his own shift in perspective. He had realized that true leadership wasn't about carrying the weight of the world on his own. It was about empowering others, trusting them, and finding strength in unity. The road ahead would be difficult. There were still many obstacles to overcome. But Musk had learned a crucial lesson: no matter how grand the vision, no leader can succeed without the support and collaboration of those around them. And with that, Musk began to rebuild, not just his companies, but his own sense of purpose. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he wasn't facing it alone anymore. The aftermath of the crisis marked a pivotal moment in Elon Musk's life. The lessons he had learned over the past year, about leadership, collaboration, and vulnerability, began to reshape his perspective on what it truly meant to lead. No longer was it about bearing the world's burdens in solitude, it was about creating an ecosystem of collaboration where the combined strength of his teams would be the true driving force behind his companies. Musk was now facing a new horizon, a horizon that demanded change, but also offered a chance for renewal. In the wake of his public admission of vulnerability, Musk's personal life also began to shift. For years, he had been married to his work, pouring everything into Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures. His relationships, both personal and professional, had suffered under the weight of his single-minded ambition. But now, Musk found himself reflecting on the connections he had neglected. He reached out to his family, friends, and colleagues, seeking to rebuild those bonds that had frayed over time. Gwynne Shotwell, who had been his steady anchor during the storm, played a critical role in his recovery. Over the months following their candid conversation, the two worked closely together, setting up new frameworks for leadership and ensuring that SpaceX and Tesla were both on the path to stability. Shotwell became not only a trusted advisor but also a close confidant in ways Musk had never allowed anyone to be before. Meanwhile, Tesla's growth was taking on a new trajectory. While production and innovation were still key to its success, Musk's focus shifted to sustainability in ways he hadn't fully embraced before. As global environmental concerns escalated, Tesla's role in the green energy revolution became more crucial. Musk had always believed in the power of electric vehicles to change the world, but now, with climate change at the forefront of global conversations, the urgency to transform the transportation industry intensified. Tesla's expansion into renewable energy was accelerating. The Solar City acquisition, which had always been a gamble, was now showing tremendous promise. The integration of solar technology with Tesla's electric vehicle systems was becoming a game-changer. Musk's vision of a sustainable future was taking shape, one that went beyond electric cars and rockets. He envisioned a world where energy production, storage, and consumption were entirely sustainable, and Tesla was positioned to lead that charge. But despite the growing success of Tesla and SpaceX, Musk wasn't fully satisfied. There was still something unfinished, a feeling that he had yet to leave his mark in a way that would truly change the world. He had achieved success, but the question remained, what would be his legacy? Was it enough to change industries? Or was his purpose something deeper, more profound? A turning point came when Musk was invited to speak at the United Nations Climate Change Conference. It was an opportunity to make a statement not just as a businessman but as a global advocate for sustainability and human progress. As he took the stage, the world's eyes were on him. The years of scrutiny, the highs and lows of his career, all led to this moment. Musk stood before the international community, and for the first time, he felt a deep sense of responsibility not only for his companies but for the planet. Climate change is the single most important issue we face today, he began, his voice steady and resolute. We have the tools, the technology, and the innovation to solve it. But we need to act now. If we continue to wait, the consequences will be irreversible. My companies, Tesla, SpaceX, and Solar City, are all working toward one common goal, a future where humanity can thrive without harming the planet. This is not just a business, this is a movement. Musk's speech resonated with the global audience. His words were clear, direct, and filled with the conviction that had made him a force in the business world. But now, there was an additional layer to his message, a call to action. It wasn't just about innovation, it was about the collective responsibility of humanity to act before it was too late. The speech marked a significant moment in Musk's career, but it also marked a turning point in his personal life. The pressure of the previous years had forced him to confront his own limitations, and now, he was beginning to feel a sense of peace. He no longer felt the need to prove himself in the same way. The world knew his name, knew his companies, and knew his drive. But Musk had come to realize that it was not just about what he could accomplish. It was about what he could leave behind. He began focusing more on mentoring the next generation of innovators. His vision for education, which had once seemed like an afterthought, was now becoming a central part of his work. He had always believed that the future of humanity depended on the next generation, and now he was putting his money where his mouth was. Musk created a foundation dedicated to supporting educational initiatives focused on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, particularly for underserved communities. He funded scholarships, set up mentorship programs, and worked closely with educators to develop a curriculum that would prepare young people to tackle the biggest challenges of the future. As SpaceX made history with successful crewed missions to the International Space Station and beyond, and as Tesla became a global leader in renewable energy and electric vehicles, Musk began to see the fruits of his labor in a way he never had before. The Mars mission was closer than ever, and Tesla's mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy was gaining traction worldwide. But more than that, Musk was witnessing the impact of his new focus on humanity's future. The educational initiatives were taking hold, and young people were inspired to pursue careers in science and technology, driven by the idea that they could shape the world for the better. The world was beginning to change, and Musk's role in that change was more profound than he had ever imagined. One evening, as Musk sat in his office, looking out at the sprawling horizon of SpaceX's headquarters, he realized how far he had come. The road had been long, filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But in the end, he had built something much larger than himself. His companies had transformed industries, and his vision for a sustainable, multiplanetary future was becoming a reality. But perhaps the most rewarding part of all was knowing that he had played a role in inspiring the next generation. His legacy was not just the rockets or the electric cars, it was the people who had been inspired by his work to push the boundaries even further. Elon Musk had achieved what he had always dreamed of, a future where technology and humanity could coexist, where the impossible was possible. And in that moment, he felt a sense of peace that had long eluded him. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, he knew that he had found his true purpose. The horizon, as always, was vast. And Musk was ready for whatever lay ahead. As the years rolled on, Elon Musk's name continued to be synonymous with groundbreaking innovation, audacious goals, and a relentless pursuit of a future that many thought impossible. However, by the time the dust had settled from his early tumultuous years, marked by explosive success, public scrutiny, and moments of deep personal struggle, Musk's legacy had evolved into something far more complex than anyone could have anticipated. In his earlier days, Musk had often been viewed as a visionary, driven by a singular obsession with pushing the boundaries of what technology and humanity could achieve. He had revolutionized industries, from electric cars to space travel. Yet, this was not the legacy he had originally imagined for himself. When the world looked at Elon Musk, it was no longer just the tech mogul behind Tesla or the ambitious founder of SpaceX. Over time, he had become a symbol of resilience. His ability to recover from setbacks and failures, sometimes spectacularly, had earned him the admiration of many. But what truly defined his legacy was the evolution of his character. The shift started subtly. Musk had always been driven by the need to change the world. However, with the mounting pressures of his companies, the growing demands of his personal life, and a deepening understanding of the world's most urgent problems, he found himself reflecting on a much larger responsibility. No longer was he only a disruptor in business, Musk began to see himself as a steward of humanity's future, a role that required a different approach to leadership, one built not on individual brilliance alone, but on collective action. In the years after his public admission of struggles, Musk made concerted efforts to step back and allow those around him to rise to the occasion. Gwynne Shotwell, his trusted ally at SpaceX, became even more integral to the company's daily operations. While Musk still maintained the overarching vision, Shotwell and other key executives took on more responsibility, allowing SpaceX to thrive with a level of collaboration Musk had not prioritized before. At Tesla, the dynamic had shifted as well. The company that had once been Musk's personal vision had grown into a global force. With increasing market competition, Tesla had learned to adapt in ways it hadn't before. Musk, ever the forward thinker, redirected his energy to the next frontiers, namely, how Tesla could accelerate its transition to a fully sustainable energy ecosystem. The new focus on renewable energy solutions, from solar panels to energy storage, became just as important to Musk as the company's electric vehicles. The world was beginning to see the results. Tesla was no longer just a car company, it was a model of what a sustainable future could look like. And Musk was, more than ever, a driving force behind that vision. But it was also a time of deep introspection for him. He realized that no matter how much he had accomplished, he couldn't do it all alone. And, even more profoundly, the real legacy wasn't just about technology, it was about human progress, about empowering others to rise up and lead. A defining moment came when Musk stood before the United Nations Climate Change Conference, not just as a tech CEO but as an advocate for the future of humanity. His speech, delivered with the same boldness and drive that had fueled his rise, focused on the urgency of the climate crisis and humanity's collective responsibility to act. Climate change is not just a threat, it's an existential crisis, he said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of years of work. But we have the tools to solve it. The future is electric, it's sustainable, and it's within our grasp. At Tesla, SpaceX, and Solar City, we're working every day toward that future. But the question is, will the world join us? Will we take responsibility and act now? The room fell silent as Musk's words lingered. For years, he had been the maverick, the wild genius pushing the limits of what was possible. But now, in front of a global audience, he was calling for a collective effort, a call for humanity to come together in the face of an urgent, shared challenge. The speech wasn't just about showcasing the progress his companies had made, it was a plea for action from the broader global community. And it resonated deeply. In the years that followed, Musk's public persona continued to evolve. He made deliberate efforts to shift from being the embodiment of single-handed ambition to becoming a proponent of leadership that emphasized humility, transparency, and collaboration. He became more vocal about the need for corporate responsibility, calling on tech giants, including his own companies, to be mindful of their social and environmental impact. In his personal life, Musk also found balance. His relationships, once strained by his relentless ambition, began to heal. He rekindled connections with his family and friends, learning to appreciate the value of support and community. Though he had always been a visionary, Musk discovered the importance of being present in the lives of those who mattered most. In his later years, Musk turned his attention to education, seeing it as the cornerstone of humanity's future. His foundation, established to promote STEM education and support young innovators, quickly became one of his proudest achievements. Musk funded scholarships for students from underrepresented backgrounds, helped establish partnerships with schools around the world, and mentored young scientists and engineers, hoping to inspire them to think beyond the status quo and dream of solutions that could change the world. Musk began to see that his legacy wasn't just about the technology he created, it was about the generations of innovators who would continue the work he had started. His influence was no longer confined to Tesla's electric vehicles or SpaceX's rockets. It was alive in the minds of young people who were now thinking bigger, imagining futures far beyond what Musk had once dreamed possible. Looking back on his journey, Elon Musk found himself at peace. He had built an empire, but more importantly, he had ignited a movement. The world was changing, and Musk had played a crucial part in that transformation. His name would forever be linked to the electric vehicle revolution, to space exploration, and to the fight against climate change. But perhaps his most important contribution was his role in shifting the narrative around what was possible, and in showing the world that the future wasn't just something to dream about, it was something that could be built. The mistakes, the failures, and the moments of doubt all played a part in shaping Musk into the man he had become. And while he would never stop striving to push the boundaries of possibility, he now understood that his true legacy wasn't just about the challenges he conquered. It was about the hope he inspired, the lives he touched, and the future he had helped shape. In the quiet moments, as Musk watched his companies continue to grow and as his vision for a sustainable, multiplanetary future slowly came to fruition, he realized that his greatest accomplishment had been the people he had empowered to carry the torch forward. The journey was still unfolding, but now, Musk knew that the horizon wasn't just a destination, it was a symbol of the endless possibilities that lay ahead for humanity. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?